I want to speak on the difference between perception and being. Perception and being. They're two completely different things. And I think oftentimes people are more focused on how they're perceived rather than focusing on how they're being. And confusing these two things is going to lead to a lot of stress, a lot of frustration. But if you can really reach that understanding, and this is why you should watch this entire video, and you should really watch the whole thing, because if you can really grasp this distinction, it can totally transform your relationships. It can actually give you what you want on both accounts, so that who you are and how people see you are actually one and the same, generally speaking. And that'll really improve the quality of your life if you're having a problem with that. Okay, so oftentimes people will ask questions like, how do I get this person to like me? Or how do I make people think I'm cool? How do I make people think I'm attractive? How do I get girls to think that I'm alpha, right? These are just the most common kind of questions that I hear off the top of my head, and the problems that I see people presenting with a lot of the times. The thing is, I don't fault them for asking it in that way, but it does show that the way that they're seeing the problem is fundamentally flawed. So for instance, for a guy who's asking, how do I get people to believe I'm cool, right? How do I get people to see that I'm cool? How do I make people like me? It's like, you want them to see something, right? But it's not exactly about what do they see. It's more like, how are you showing up? Rather than being perceived as someone who's cool, maybe you can be somebody who's cool. And so it's not so much that you're doing these things, and because these people see these things, now in their mind it's like, oh, okay, you're cool. It's more like, yo, I am self-assured. I am at ease with who I am. I am comfortable with myself and with what I'm presenting to this interaction. And because that anxiety and that internal conflict isn't present, what they see is somebody who is just at ease, at peace. I'm cool. And in that sense, when I show up, I don't have to exert anything. There's nothing added to who I am that's gonna make them see me as cool. It's like I'm presenting myself, and that manifests because of how I'm being. It doesn't manifest because of any extra things I'm doing. If anything, the approach is the opposite. When you approach something with the aim of being perceived a particular way, the answer is going to be addition. It's going to be, you have to do this. It's going to be like a checklist of things you're doing. You have to do this. Your posture has to be this way. You have to say words this way. You have to have this kind of eye contact. You have to, have your body language a certain way, etc., etc. It's all addition when you're playing the game of perception. When you're playing the game of being, it's a game of subtraction. It's like, okay, I am this. This is how I feel, and this is what I have and what I am. What do I have that's getting in the way of that being read properly? Right. So it's not like I'm pretending to be confident. I'm not pretending to be at ease with myself. There aren't behaviors that I'm adding to myself in order to have that be conveyed. It's more like, this is where I am. This is who I am. And there are things that might be in the way of that being seen properly. And I have to be aware of that and do my absolute best to remove those things. And in removing those things, it's like you get a clearer and clearer picture of who I actually am. So it's not a game of decorating yourself so that you're seen a certain way. Instead, the game changes to, there are things getting in the way of you seeing who I truly am, what I actually am. And I want to remove those things. And the reason why being is so much harder than perception is, with perception, you have things to hide behind, right? You're presenting. And with being, it's a much more vulnerable game. It's a much more vulnerable game, but it's much more rewarding too. Because when you're playing the game of perception, if people respond positively to it, it's like they're responding positively to what you're doing. They're responding positively to what you've shown them. They're not responding to who you are. And when you're playing the game of being, people are responding to who you are because you are giving them who you are. You're presenting yourself. And so it's much more personal. It's much more reaffirming when someone is laughing at a joke that you've said, and you've said the joke not because it's going to present you a certain way, but because it resonates with you personally, because you find this funny and you want to share the joy that you're experiencing with another person. And if it lands, it's like, yo, this is resonance. It's like you feel me. You don't feel the presentation. You don't feel the act, because it's not an act. This is something that I'm saying and showing you because it means something to me. It's there's no ulterior motive. It's an expression. It's an honest, earnest expression of who I am, where I'm at, how I think, and how I feel. Whereas oftentimes, and you see this in the space with dating a lot, with men who want to be perceived as confident, men want to be seen as alpha, men want to be seen as attractive. And if that's the game you're playing, then even when you succeed, you fail. Because the girl sees your actions as alpha. She sees the posture that you've turned on, the word choice that you've started to using, the tricks that you've started to lean on. Those things are seen as attractive. But what about you? Who are you when the acts are gone? When you can't hold up the posture anymore, when you take the mask off, do they actually resonate with who you truly are? Like, who are you when you strip away all of that? When you're not putting energy into a performance. And I think a lot of people have become so untrusting of who they are. They underestimate their value. They fail to see themselves such that they believe a performance is better than the actuality of who they are. They believe an act will be rewarded better than the truth of who they are and where they're at. And here's an interesting thing too about that is with the game of perception, performance, that's a very stagnant game, right? So if you do find something that works, quote unquote, let's say you do find a behavior that gets you the reward that you're seeking. You find the mask that gets people to see you the way that they want to see you. That mask isn't going to change because you're getting what you want out of it. There's no reason to change it because it's working, quote unquote. If you play the game of being, if you're not wearing a mask and you show up earnestly, any rewards or consequences that you get aren't feedback towards what you're doing. They're feedback towards who you are. And in that sense, it's going to drive earnest evolution and growth and progress. And so the only way that experiences are going to inform you, land for you, evolve you into a better person is you have to show up honestly and earnestly. And so the punishments that you might be avoiding through performance could end up being a disservice to the person that you're meant to be, to ultimately who you're going to become, and the true rewards that person is going to receive, the rewards that are meant for that person, the rewards that are going to be fulfilling for not only the person receiving them, but also the person giving them, because it's a match. It's meant to be there. But if you're wearing the mask, the rewards that the mask get are meant for the mask, and sure, you can benefit from them, but ultimately, again, it's a stagnant game, right? You're not learning about who you are. You're not learning about yourself. You're not learning about the world through that. The lessons that you get are lessons for the tools. They're not lessons for you. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, if I were to continue talking about it, I'd just be beating a dead horse. I guess the last example I could give would be, people, they'll ask the question of like, how can I be charismatic? How can I be likable? How can I be interesting to people? That's a fun one, right? Is the big trick to being a good listener, to making people feel heard, to making people want to share with you, is to be a good listener. It's not like you're doing this checklist of things, and because you've done this checklist of things, people are like, great, I feel heard. It's more like, no, you lock in. You're like, I genuinely want to understand you. I'm here. I'm showing up. And then rather than adding to that intention, if the intention is there, then there are likely things that are, instead of things you need to add, it's likely things that you need to take away so that the intention is conveyed clearly. So for instance, if you are someone who wants to be a good listener, right? You don't want to present as a good listener. You don't want to be perceived as a good listener. You want to be a good listener, which ironically is going to get you perceived as a good listener. So you're knocking down both at the same time playing this game. But anyway, if you want to be a good listener, it could be like, yo, when I'm listening to someone talk, sometimes I'm thinking about what am I going to say next, rather than being totally immersed in every single syllable of every word that they're saying and really grasping the idea that they're presenting to me. And so I have to take away the things that are getting in the way of me focusing on what's happening and focusing on the person who is engaging with me. And instead of trying to figure out what do I have to do so that they think I care, instead of trying to get them to think you care, perception versus being, you have to actually care. What they say has to actually matter to you. And if you're not there yet, then you can be honest with yourself and say, yo, I'm not the person who cares about what people say. And live that, embody that, because that's where you are. That's truly where you're at. And there are going to be lessons that you're going to learn. And you might earnestly, in expressing that honesty, having the experiences, both the painful and the rewarding ones, you may come to a point where you realize, it doesn't serve me not to care about how people think. And it's not because I'm trying to be a good person. It's not because I want to be seen a certain way. It's because I truly feel and have learned. I'm truly in that space where I don't resonate with not caring about what people think. I'm in a place where I don't resonate with a world where only my opinion matters. That's where I truly am. I'm not acting like it. It's not lip service. It's embodied. And from there you grow and you develop. And that's what the game of life is all about to me. It's about honesty, and it's about truth, and it's about personal, real growth and development. And you don't get that when you're performing. You don't get that when you're acting. You get that when you're being. And so that's the video. Thanks for watching.